I'm an early user of it now, so.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is 1 o'clock on Monday, May 20th, 2024, and I'm going to call today's workshop meeting to order. This is the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners. If everybody could stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. We'll take a brief moment of silence. This is for individual prayer, reflection, or meditation. We take this time to honor and remember our first responders and the men and women in our military who keep us safe and protect our freedoms at home and abroad. And also, if you could keep in your thoughts and prayers the family of Alice Stewart. It's a CNN commentator who was with us recently to speak at Tiger Bay, but more importantly is the sister of Heather Thompson, who is, I think, widely known throughout the county. So thank you. All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks. Absolutely. Again, welcome, everybody. We'll got 3 items for discussion today. We're going to discuss health insurance, cost of living adjustment, and road and bridge with a presentation on Daytona North. So without further ado, we will hand it over to our administrator and get us going.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to our 3rd budget workshop. Let's see if I can get this to go. There we go. This is a chart that or a graphic that we've used before. We're currently in the budget development phase. We were provided with some very preliminary estimates regarding the property values and new construction estimates. I believe our primary preliminary estimate will be coming to us June 1st, along with our constitutional officer's budget submittals, the request for fiscal year 25. And then a little bit later, coming on July 1st, we'll have our certified taxable value. So as we continue to work on budget development, we are mindful of the board's guidance and direction in looking to reduce the millage, as well as having a focus on deferred maintenance, increasing reserves, controlling expenditures by holding the line. Today's workshop meeting was actually added to the calendar. It wasn't originally on there. But we still have about 9 more meetings and hearings scheduled on the budget. So this is our 3rd opportunity for citizen engagement and public input. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is the agenda for today. We are going to briefly go over the employee benefits as it stands right now, as well as some roadway infrastructure with a little focus on Daytona North Service District as far as work orders and staff allocation. So back when we started that budget kickoff back in February, we had a few unknown items with regard to the employee health insurance, the cost of living adjustment, retirement, and what some of those legislative impacts were going to be. We're going to go over each one of those items today in a little bit more detail just to share where we are. And then a larger portion of it is focused on the roadway network and infrastructure. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing, in looking at the employee health insurance, I had sent out a packet, I think it came out on Friday to you, which was information that we had received from the Bailey Group regarding our health insurance. This is basically just a summary. I'm not going to go over the presentation that I sent out to you from Bailey Group, but this is more or less just a summary. Based on the proposed changes, we did have discussions with Sherry of the Bailey Group, as well as a meeting with our internal self-funded insurance committee, which included representation of all of the constitutional officers. As you know, we have a self-funded health insurance plan. We've got a requirement to keep about 2.5 months of claim expense in reserves. Last year, when we ended the year, we were in the red by a little over 1.9 million. And at year end, we ended up shoring up that fund to get it ready for the following year. Once again, we are projected to end in a deficit this year as well. We have a few high claims out there. We are waiting to receive some funding back on our stop loss, which will help. But they're estimating right now that we'll probably have a shortfall of about $2 million at year end. Although we did make some plan design changes and some slight increases last year in an effort to balance the fund, once again, we're proposing to do another increase to the insurance fund. We're looking at a 15.3% increase to the employer contribution as well as the employee. It's similar to what we did last year. I think last year it was a flat 15% increase. This one's a little bit higher. But moving forward, we aren't going to be covering weight loss medications. If you saw in that backup I provided, one of the more costly ones was Wegovy. There are other ones on that list. Some of them are used to treat diabetes, but if you are a diabetic and on those medications, you'll still be able to have those available to you. It's really the ones that are being used for weight loss strictly that we're going to be no longer having the weight loss medication on there. This should save us somewhere around $650,000 a year in doing that. There aren't any changes really to the prescriptions through OptumRx. So that's really about it on that. Moving forward, looking at vision and dental, these are paid by the employee. Vision will remain the same. Dental will have a slight increase of about 6.04%. Again, that's in line with where we were last year. There are no proposed changes at the employee health clinic. Utilization remains steady and high. But I think with the elimination of having the weight loss medication running through the clinic, it should maybe free up some additional appointments there. We are continuing to see a good return on our investment. For every dollar that we're spending at the clinic, we do realize a return of about $1.65. So we are seeing a benefit there at the clinic. There is no increase right now proposed for our life insurance benefits. We're guaranteed for 2 years. One of the things that we were adding this year is the ability for employees to take out short-term and long-term disability benefits. By taking that out, there's no cost to the county, but by doing that, our life insurance carrier said that they would actually extend the guarantee for 3 years rather than the 2. So that's a positive thing. Looking at that long-term and short-term disability, it is something that we offer now, AFLAC. It's a little bit different program. This would be running through payroll deduction. What we're proposing for employees that would like to do it, it's completely paid for by the employee and not the county. Moving forward, folks that have AFLAC can continue their AFLAC coverage, but it's not something that we're going to be offering. We're moving to a different platform or a different program. So in looking at the proposed changes that came out of legislature, FRS did have a slight increase to the rates. What we're realizing is an increase of 7.25%. That's not all the FRS rate, that's the impact to our budget. So as your salaries go up and the FRS rate went up slightly, it ends up being a combined increase of 7.25% in our line item for the FRS cost. When we're looking at it, it's about $490,000 increase to our budget. Not all of it's in the general fund. Part of it is in enterprise funds. So of that 490, we've got 433 on the general fund and 57 for your non-general fund departments. And then looking at the COLA, this was based on the March South Region Consumer Price Index, or CPI. We've used both the 12-month average or the year over year. Last year, we moved to the year over year amount, which happened to be 5.3%. This year, we're opting for that same method, which is at 3.9%. So that would be the COLA that would end up going out to the employees. Overall impact is about $1.3 million. And that's the same number that we shared with our constitutionals. And then this is really just a chart showing you the two different methods and how they've tracked over the past year. Some years there may be a more significant difference between the two, but this year they came out to be relatively the same when we looked at it in March. So before I move on, does anybody have any questions about the employee benefit portion?
I do, Chair. So on the weight loss drugs, my concern was there was another chart somewhere in here that actually showed, I think it was tied over to the clinic, the increase in people diagnosed with diabetes in correlation. So if we believe by not including weight loss drugs as an approval, are they currently coded as approved because for strictly weight loss, or are people being diagnosed with diabetes and then being prescribed weight loss, and that's why they're being approved? So what I'm saying is, how do we know people still won't be labeled or diagnosed with diabetes and we would still be approving the weight loss medication, and that we wouldn't truly have a savings of $650,000? Because the plan doesn't approve weight loss drugs, but it does approve diabetes drugs. So if they continue to be called diabetic, they'd still be assigned the drug and we'd still have the cost,
Well,
right?
the dosage is way different. For instance, I have diabetes type 2,
Yeah.
and I have Ozempic, which is 0.5 milligrams once a week. As a weight loss, it's 0.5 every day, every single day. That's why it gets really
But I think on
expensive.
like Moderna's once a week and Wegovy's once a week, which is the top drug that we're seeing cost associated with. And from my experience, you have to be diagnosed diabetes for our current insurance to pay for that shot, which is $1,000 a week. Is the cost of that shot. So if people continue to be labeled diabetic and we're still covering it for a diabetic drug, which I don't disagree, we shouldn't cover diabetes drugs, how do we know we'll actually end up having a savings of $650? Because the one chart did show that there was a correlation of a lot of people suddenly were diagnosed pre-diabetic, diabetic, and then assigned these drugs. So I'm just worried that we won't actually see that savings like we think we will, because they'll still be labeled diabetic. We're still covering diabetic. They're still getting the drug.
I had the same question as the commissioner. I was thinking about that as you were presenting, and I was likening it back to the early days of medical marijuana, where you could get a prescription for depression or something like that, pretty simple, and that qualified you for the medical marijuana. So I'm just wondering if, we could have a situation of doctor shopping or whatever to be able to get, a diagnosis that it's going to, help from a diabetes standpoint. I don't know. Just
I understand the concern, and when we met with Sherry from the Bailey Group, it's my understanding that there were about 75 people that were on our plan that were taking Wegovy. So Wegovy, according to what Sherry had told us, is only used for weight loss. It's not a diabetic medication. So the Ozempic and some of those that are used to treat diabetes are still going to be available. But the Wegovy was the main one that, and I think there was maybe one or two others that she had told us were strictly for weight loss, and that we had 75 people on them. I do think that, I can think off the top of my head, some of our employees that were recently diagnosed with either pre-diabetes or diabetic. So I do think that we have more people that are being diagnosed with that. So I don't know how they're coding them at the health clinic, because we don't have that kind of information, but we can certainly share that with Brian. He's the manager that oversees the clinic, and have a conversation with them.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen, it's a false sense of relief in the plan, because I think what'll happen is they'll just move them to Mounjaro, or that's what people do. They just move over to Ozempic, to Mounjaro, whatever gets covered. They have that semaglutide list of 5 drugs, and they plug them in there, and they label them pre-diabetic so they can get around the approval. And so it'll be interesting. I don't think we'll have a true savings. I think that'll end up being what happens, and nobody wants to deny diabetic drugs. I don't want to do that. So I don't know that this will really happen. That's what I'm saying.
Mr.
It happens with, they just move the diagnosis code around and back into the drug. So that's what I think will happen. That's it. That's my thought.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted, this will be the last time I can make this point, but since I'm not running again, so I'm not doing it for any political reason, but just to point out that as I leave, and Greg may have some of the same points to make, but he's still going to be here, I don't take any medical coverage at all because I have military, but I could, and actually your coverage here is a little bit better when it comes to vision and dental than I get from the military. So for 8 years, I haven't done that. My wife had bad diseases and I had some bad diseases. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars that would have come out of the thing. And the reason I'm making that point is that I'm leaving and the person coming in probably will want the full, benefits like everybody else does. And I also don't do the Florida retirement system, which also helps a little bit. So over the last years, you've been saving, I don't know, $25,000 a year just on me alone, and then not having any big medical costs, which there would have been. And the reason I make that, not to say, hey, man, we did it, but it could have an impact here. It's another, because a lot of times the people who win elections are older and probably are maybe, more prone to medical problems. So I just make that, and I think Greg is in the same boat for some of this too. And we're talking big bucks for some of these things that didn't happen. That's it.
The only thing I'll add on the diabetic and the weight loss stuff is I'm hoping that if we have more diagnosis of pre-diabetes, I mean, those are medical determinations based on somebody's characteristics, that the drugs that are used for them, if it gets prescribed over long term, that's a positive to our health plan if those people are getting healthy with those drugs on a long-term basis. It's preventative. And the other thing I would say is if we focus maybe on some other weight loss programs that through the clinic that might offer some alternatives than the expensive drugs. That's all.
And we thought about it when we were working through this with our internal group. We do have weight loss programs. We have access to a nutritionist. There are programs where you get reduced gym memberships and things like that. So we do run some of those alternative programs. It's really a lifestyle change for most people. And you need to commit to that lifestyle change. When you take the medication that they're taking, I mean, there's some adverse effects on your body and your organs, but the minute you stop taking it, you're going to revert right back to where you started. So it's not the answer. We made a decision, I guess, last year to cover the weight loss medication, but we thought that we would see a reduction in our claim expense, and we're not seeing a correlation between somebody being healthy, losing weight, and the expense that we're seeing right now. So that's why internally when we met, we discussed it, and it was of the mindset of let's cut it and see what happens. But I think the point's well taken, and I understand where you're all coming from. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
So we're going to move over then to roadway infrastructure and focus on Daytona North. Currently, Public Works, Road and Bridge relies on gas tax as their only source of revenue for road maintenance, which we do recognize it has been decreasing over the years. Public Works has an annual operating budget somewhere between $3 to $3.5 million a year, depending on how much is collected in gas tax. About half of it is spent on stormwater-related activities in support of the road network. And then the properties in Daytona North Service District, they pay an additional 58-cent front foot assessment, which offsets some of the additional maintenance costs in the Daytona North Service District. It is also used to cover the spraying for mosquitoes when necessary, as well as some storm water maintenance activities. In total, the contribution's about 255 to 260,000 a year that comes in from Daytona North. But we'll go ahead and take a look at the county's roadway infrastructure and Daytona North. So right now, the roadway bridge work program consists of your road and bridge, which is really your operation and maintenance side of maintaining your paved roads as well as your dirt roads. And then on the other side, it's your engineering department, which is really the design and construction of new roads. So road and bridge is doing the day-to-day out in the field, and engineering is handling more of the capital outlay portion of construction, replacement, and rehabilitation. This is a snapshot of the total pavement network that we have in Flagler County. As you can see, the network consists of 110 road miles or center lane miles and 220 lane miles. So this road network net asset value is approximately $275 million based on current full cost construction values that are provided by FDOT. So I apologize, this screen's got a lot of detailed information on there. But as you can see, we've got about 110 miles of paved roads and then approximately 122 miles of unpaved roads. We've got them broken out here by major, minor, and then your local roads. And so as you can see, all of your major collectors are paved. Your minor collectors still have a segment of unpaved dirt roads, and that's primarily along Hargrove and Otis Stone Hunter. And then you've got your local roads, which makes up the largest portion, and you can see you've got quite a bit of those that are still dirt. Your traffic volume on your major and minor collectors range anywhere between 3,700 to 300 average daily trips. And then your local roads, the range is somewhere probably between 10 and 150 average daily trips. But when you're looking at it, typically your roadway traffic volume, your daily trips, is generally the most important factor in prioritizing the roadway maintenance and improvements. But you can see how we utilize or allocate that budget, where you've got about 20% being spent on your major, 16% of your budget's being used on your minor, and then 65%, or the largest portion, is actually being used to support your local dirt roads.
Is that just the cost of grading them and dragging them, and that's where that money goes?
It is. It's for, you'll see it broken out in an upcoming slide, where it's really the labor for staff and then the utilization of equipment. It doesn't include your cost of like culvert replacement, or if you ended up having to put shell materials out there, stuff like that. That's based on your staff, manpower allocation, and equipment.
So a current example would be the 40 grade road, putting the shell in there would not be picked up in here.
The cost of the employee and the equipment, yes, but then the component of the shell material runs through an operating budget, so it's not captured in the work order. So this detail, and we're going to move along, but you'll see it broken out where it's broken out by how much the dollar amount is in each one of the categories, and that's information that we capture through our work order system tied to payroll and budget. So this is a snapshot of our pavement conditions and how we compare today. We use an in-house staff to do the PACER score. And the PACER score is really more like a windshield assessment. About every 5 years, we hire a company to come in and they do a PCI score, which is really your pavement condition. And they'll come in and they use equipment and technology to kind of come up with the overall score. And then in between those 5 years, internally, we manage it doing more of a windshield assessment just to manage it. So there's really not much of a change from last year to this year. The biggest increase was the new paved roads that we had in Marineland Acres. And as you recall, those were completed along with the master stormwater improvements that the residents ended up paying as an assessment on their tax bill. So we've added those Marineland Acre roads. And then through our efforts with engineering and FDOT, we do anticipate over the next 5 years that we'll have some additional unpaved roads coming onto this program. We've got Old Hall Creek that's getting ready to start, Hargrove, Grade. We've got County Road 90. The second phase of that, we also have County Road 205, and then some other Daytona North roads coming up. So
I don't understand the last row.
the score, the 6.5 being good.
What's 74?
Yeah, it's two different metrics. So PCI is the company that we hire, and the PCI score goes up to like 100, where the Pacer score goes up to a 10. But when you look at their ranges, it ends up being that they're all good. The Pacer score is a little bit different. That's the windshield one that we manage internally. But the metric or that scale, it still comes out to be good. So we just manage it internally, track it, and then every 5 years, PCI will be done again.
Do you know which one is the failed road or the very poors?
You have one down in Rima Ridge. I think that might be it. I'm pretty sure that that's the one that it is. We also had one that was very poor that was out off of John Anderson in the, I can't think of the name of the community, but it's, Bob Snyder lives down there off of John Anderson. I can't, Bulow Circle, thank you. Yeah. So I know we talked about it last year, a little bit about pavement preservation and what is it. And it's really an organized approach of maintenance and rehabilitation in the most cost-effective manner, with the goal being that we're going to extend the life cycle of the pavement infrastructure. So it's about applying the right treatment to the right road at the right time, which ends up benefiting the road and the longevity of that road. So here's a cross-section of pavement along with a graphic demonstrating the timing for preservation, which typically would occur somewhere between year 12 to year 15. So for every dollar that you end up spending during that time frame, it'll end up preventing you from having to spend somewhere between $6 and $10 down the road, having to do a full reclamation of the road. So, the benefits, there's many, improved resident satisfaction, which would keep us all happy, lowers the cost in the long term, which in the end saves us money, and then improved safety, which, keeps us all safe, so. And then this is a snapshot of our road inventory. So right now you've got a total of 110 paved roadway center lane miles, which is currently in a good to fair score. If we looked at the net asset value, looking at about $2.5 million for center line mile, that's if you were to construct brand new, you're looking at $275 million of net asset value. Based on the current condition of our road, that brings it down to about $192 million. And then looking at doing the pavement preservation and rehab cost, which would end up costing you about $1 million a mile, that would be projected to be at that 15-year interval. So if we do the math and look at the number of lane miles we have at 110, we would need 110 million, and then every 15 years, you would end up, rehabbing or redoing those roads. We would have to set aside $7.5 million annually to be able to fund that. Then looking at the kind of like that red or that pink line, that's your unpaved roads. So you've got 122 miles of unpaved inventory, and that's where you'll hit that $2.5 million because it's building the road in its entirety. That's at $305 million. And if we tried, this would be really aggressive, but if we tried doing that over a 20-year period, we'd have to start setting aside about $15 million a year to be able to pave those roads over the next 20 years. Like I said, it might be a little aggressive. But then looking at the bottom, this is the funding that engineering has received. You can see on average, we've had some years higher than others, but the scrap and SCOP funds typically offer about $5.5 million annually. And historically, the general fund has put in about $1 million annually. So annually, we've got about $6.5 million to work with. And basically, it just lets you know that the current needs are much greater than the resources that we currently have available. So this is a look at the labor and equipment. This is pulled out of our work order system. I know that there has been some discussions about level of service received, as well as the allocation of our resources. So when we pulled the data from our work order system, prior to 24, it was in a different system. It was in Naviline. We're now in a Tyler Munis product. So we had to go back and pull all of the reports going back to fiscal year 18 and kind of build it out that way based on the work orders. And then we broke it out by two different ways. One by ratio by area, showing the labor and equipment allocation in Daytona North, as well as the hammock. And then the paved and unpaved is the collection of all your other county roads that we maintain. And then we also broke it down by road classification, whether again it was major, minor, or a local road. And that top line is fiscal year 24. That's year to date. So that was October 1st through the end of last month.
I'm sorry, but you've probably already said DNSD. What does that stand for?
Daytona North Service District.
Okay.
In like Colbert, that would be a major road.
That
right?
would be in the paved, unpaved section. Yeah, and it would also be, I think Colbert was a minor collector. If I went back to that screen, let's see if I can look real quick.
I thought it was a major.
It might have been. I'm going by memory. Colbert Lane, you're right, it's a major collector of about 7 miles.
So it'd be interesting I mean, you don't have it on here, but it'd be interesting to understand by usage, traffic count, where the allocation is. Because, I mean, if you look at here, fiscal year 24, we got 73% is going to the local roads, but yet the traffic count's probably much different on the major and minor roads combined.
Yeah.
So
In talking to engineering on the major and minor road network, it's anywhere from 300 to about 3,700 trips a day. That's the average. So we don't have a counter out necessarily on every road, but that's kind of the average. It's definitely far surpasses the local road, which was anywhere from like 10 to maybe 150 trips a day on those roads.
and those users are from the whole county.
Yes.
Would be a lot less would be the case on the local roads, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm. So that's just by percentages, and then we ended up breaking it down by the dollar amount. So this is, again, tied to our financial system and our payroll. And so it just gives you the dollar amount being spent in each one of these areas.
I have a quick question. Okay. These dollar amounts are based on what, the FEMA rates that we use to assess?
It's the FEMA rates that are in the system, because that's we
Right.
can't have like two sets of numbers. The only thing that I will say, these numbers don't represent, and I think I may have said it already, it doesn't include additional operating costs, like if the department has overhead, administrative costs, cost of materials such as culverts, shell, concrete, cold patch
Well,
fines, and stuff like that.
The Daytona North activity report does include the, if you're using it, the shell. Haul road material, dirt, shell are all in there in the calculate $2,060 on this date for shell. Dirt, shell, it's $162.
Yeah, those are costs that run through the operating. They're not coming out of the payroll system or out of the work order system. The cost of hauling the material is in there because that would be your truck haul and your staff.
Okay.
But to actually purchase the material, it's not factored into these numbers. So, and I say that because when you look at Public Works budget, it's anywhere from $3 to $3.5 million. If you look here in that total column, nothing there hits 3 to 3.5 million. It's that delta, that difference between that is the operating costs that are borne by that department that aren't hitting these areas per se. We don't have a way to tie the work order to the material that gets purchased out of the department.
So when the special assessment was made, because I wasn't here, I don't know if anyone on this board was here when the special assessment was made for this area. What was the level of service agreement made between the neighboring area and the special assessment in general? So what was the implied level of service they'd receive? Is it any level of service we give you? Is it 4 times a year that they agreed to? Is it, what was the special service amendment? I mean, did we say for your special assessment, you will be receiving stormwater, animal pickup, you know, your roads work 3 times a week? Was there any agreement ever like that?
Not that I'm aware of. I've only been here 19 years, but I got hired and worked for Benji Cawley, who was the Public Works Director at the time. It's my understanding from when I got here 19 years ago, it's changed several times. Initially, when it was created, it was supposed to pay for not just the roads, but it could also be used for parks out there. I know the county built a park. It could be used for the maintenance and upkeep of the park. I think it's written into either an ordinance or something the county had passed. There had been a discussion over the years where they would take that front foot assessment and they would split it up, holding half to be used to pave the roads out there and the other half would go towards the maintenance. We used to have town hall meetings out there to talk about level of service. They even went out and got a quote to see if somebody could do it cheaper. I think it's evolved and changed. It's not that we have an agreement with the residents out there for level of service, but I know that typically they'll call or, you know, if they're needing service or want to request additional work to be done, and we just factor it into, you know, whatever our rounds look like that day. If it's a unsafe condition, naturally it takes precedent, but I don't think that there's an actual like level of service contract on what we would provide.
So I think where I always have the problem with this special assessment is, and I read through the lawsuit, and the lawsuit said, you know, you're not required to maintain the roadway or pave the roadway because you did not accept the ownership of the roadway. Okay, and that's the crux of that lawsuit. That's literally what it says. You didn't accept it. The county never accepted it. By accepting the plat, they do not accept the ownership of the roadway. Therefore, they are not required to maintain or pave the roadway. Okay, so that's that lawsuit, right? And then, but at some point, and probably long before all of us, someone decided we're going to apply for SCOP and SCRAP and apply it out here, which SCOP and SCRAP literally says in the grant, you're applying for this grant for county roadways. Okay, so at some point, we decided the definition of Daytona North was county roads. in order to try to get them up and paving. Then somewhere in the line, we decided that they would be assessed for picking up dead animals, putting up stop signs. Their stormwater came into that. The Attorney General opinion, the very latest one on a special assessment says, special assessment cannot be imposed to pay for an improvement which is primarily of general public benefit. It says that the power to make a special assessment can only be exercised for special improvements and cannot be exercised to burden particular property and the owners thereof with the cost of general and governmental benefits and expenditures. So what the special assessment must do, according to the Ashley Moody report, is it must provide a benefit which is different in type or degree from benefits provided to a community as a whole. So what is different about stormwater? What is different about animal pickup? What is different about emergency evacuation, roadway paving? What is different about their special assessment now that we have said that that's county roads and that is a county area and we've applied for these grants? I think you have to really go back to the special assessment and have an exercise of breaking out what is above and beyond general public benefit, just like she mentioned the park. Is the park not above public benefit to those who live outside of Daytona North and want to lease the building for the day? Is Mahogany not a road traveled for emergency evacuation? Should they really be assessed it if they live on, I think you have to, the cost is still the cost. Maintaining it is still maintaining it. And our job will be to figure out how to pay the cost, whether it be half-cent sales tax on roads, ad valorem. But we can't penalize that area if based on their consumption and their need for maintaining their roads, based on a lawsuit that said, well, you don't assume ownership of it, when we clearly are starting to look like we assume ownership by applying for SCOP and SCRAP. And I think you have to tear this thing down, rebuild it, and the money's the money. We're going to always have to figure out how to fund this road and bridge program, or say, this is the level of service you get with your ad valorem, just like the hammock does. This is your option. If you would like us to come out more and often, then we discuss the special assessment. But I don't know how stormwater got in there. I don't know how, all that started piling into them. Where is the benefit for their ad valorem? What is it covering for their services in general for this community? So that's always been my problem with it. It'd be one thing if this was still Panda Bear Lane, a private road that we've just made an agreement with them to, hey, you pay us this much a year and we'll come down there and grade it. I don't think that's what this community's become any longer. And I don't think we've looked at stormwater out there, at least I haven't, and said, show me that property from across the way on the farms isn't draining into their stormwater or anything like that. I just have a hard time penalizing that community if we're not seeing where they're getting the benefit of the general services. And where do you cut off general services? Where do you say, hey, your ad valorem, it goes to this general service, and this is the level above general service that rises to a special assessment. And that's what your 250, 270, 600,000, whatever it is you want to charge them. Anytime this board can change, readjust the special assessment, charge those people $700,000 a year, but they've never agreed to a level of service like that. We've never set the level of service. We've never told them, your stormwater, your animal pay. Every time you call me, every time we come out, you're going to be assessed this amount of money. It's a dangerous special assessment. I don't think it rises to the level any longer of what the statutes say. I think we need to tear it apart and figure out, should they really be paying for stormwater in their special assessment? Should they really be paying for evacuation roads in their special assessment? Should they be paying for parks? Should they be paying for dead animals to be picked up, including the use of the Ford pickup that picked them up? That's a difficult one for me to get past on this special assessment. I don't deny that the costs aren't there. That's what the labor cost, and that is what we need to figure out through ad valorem or through some other mechanism for all roads to be properly paid for, given the increase of just sheer people coming to the county. We have to figure that out. We got to get past that. And I'm starting to realize that. But this special assessment, I don't think is accurate on what should be put in it.
I think simply put is from the residents out there is what are they getting for the special assessment? And they don't know. They don't know.
What do these cost numbers have to do with the special assessment? Because if you, as a Palm Coast taxpayer, I look at these numbers and I say we have an inequitable distribution of the county dollars that we're spending on roads to an area that has far less population than the rest of the county. And how are we not allocating more dollars to county roads, the major roads that have much higher traffic counts and benefit more of the county taxpayers overall than a small subset of roads? So I'm making the counterpoint to that.
Right, but the ad valorem, you can't penalize lower valued communities who pay less tax.
Correct.
You can't penalize them. And then your ad valorem is to cover all service regardless of consumption. So that's just like saying, well, Palm Coast calls 911 6,000 times more a day. We should adjust their ad valorem to, or whatever, or they shouldn't get as much service, which is kind of an argument we're dealing with too. But
right. I'm not advocating for allocating more dollars because there's more taxes collected. I'm saying, if you look at the major roads, there's a public safety aspect to that too. And we have to have the major roads need to be safe and well maintained because, because of the traffic counts and the fact that we can have, more exposure that way from a public safety standpoint.
right. Well, and who's deciding that the majors and the minors aren't being worked on as much? Is it just call driven? I guess it is, right? I mean, you're spending all your time in Daytona North call driven, right? Based on, but I think it goes back. I just take it back to this other level. And I think there needs to be another opinion on it, which is when the lawsuit went through and they said, you've not accepted ownership of those roads, but then you came over here and you said, well, I got the SCOP and SCAP program that says it's a county road and I'm going to apply and use it out there as I see fit. Did you take ownership of the road? That would be my first question. And my second question after that is why is the park area included? Should evacuation routes be included? What was the general public benefit that they get to begin with their ad valorem and road taxes? And then on top of that, now what defines a special assessment for them that they're getting above and beyond any other county member? I can't look at the tax dollar they pay because that's like penalizing them just because they're a lower value community. And it's almost hypocrisy because we're up here struggling to create affordable housing, yet we're saying they should go up on their road tax or their frontage because we drag their dirt roads all the time. I'm just not sure that the special assessment should be applied for maintenance of the streets and the stormwater. I think you need to talk about the stormwater piece too. I don't think this judgment has been, if the county, adhered to their part of saying that's not we don't have ownership of those roads, but I think that left the train station a long time ago when you started getting SCOP and SCRAP. That's my opinion. Because you're telling the state one thing and you're doing another on these people. And that's my 2 cents, and I'm not a lawyer, but I think that we need to look back through all that one more time and make sure that we're doing right by this special assessment. I can understand mosquito if that's what they wanted. I don't know if they ever agreed to mosquito being inside their special assessment. I could understand that. The rest of it, I have a hard time wrapping. If you want to say, I'm sorry, we're going to take the special assessment away because we do have ownership of your roads and your stormwater. And but we're also only going to give you this level of service, which is what I give everybody else in the county. And if you want to discuss that afterwards, so be it. But those are now county roads. We apply for SCOP and SCRAP on those roads. Therefore, special assessment shouldn't be applied to you any longer. That's my 2 cents on it. But I just think that the people living out there never understood what the special assessment got them. And to have a board that can continually adjust and increase that special assessment rate on them just because the neighbor called every day, and they don't know that that's happening to them, that their dollar's going up and they could have a higher tax because they're calling all the time. I just think that there needs to be limitations on that if you're going to continue with a special assessment. I think you need to define what the general benefit is to those folks and then what the special gets them. So, and whether or not some of those fines or fees should really be in there. That's always been my issue with it.
And I just wanted to clarify something. There is no ad valorem dollars being used on any of our roads.
Right.
Our roads are only being funded by gas
Parking.
tax, and it depends on, the people that buy gas pay the tax. The largest population is, again, in Palm Coast. And that's the money that we get are those gas tax dollars, and that's where we invested is the road. So nothing from ad valorem is going back into the roads. I just wanted to clarify that because I know I had heard that ad valorem was being used, but it's not.
But what about parks and recs or park out there? And
We don't use the special assessment to pay for the
at
park.
some point it
It
was.
was in the initial language of allowable uses.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, it's never been utilized since I've been here 19 years. It started back, I think, in the 80s, but I don't know what happened prior to that. It's my understanding that the county received a grant to build hidden trails many years ago. It was a 20-acre parcel. They used half of it for the park, but it was through a grant. It wasn't the special assessment fund. It just happened to be rolled up into that language. And just to clarify, stormwater is a component of maintaining your roads. They go hand in hand. That's why you'll see when we do FDOT projects, you have a stormwater component. It's to keep the water off the road. That's why it's an allowable expense in Daytona North. But I just wanted to clarify that.
Right. My 2 cents. So when this was established, we had X number of miles of dirt roads that we that were brought into the county to maintain that we didn't claim ownership of, but the assessment was to maintain them. So taking Commissioner Pennington's analysis of roads that we apply
Scrap and Scott.
If we start off with X number of miles and then by applying for those funds and improving those roads, those then become county roads, we should be taking miles out of the assessment. I think you could, in essence, re-look at the assessment from the number of miles of roadways that we've converted to county by paving them and adjust the percentage that's given or applied to the residents, because obviously it's less costly to maintain the paved roads, as we've seen in your analysis, than the dirt roads. So there could be an adjustment, in my opinion, based on the amount of roads we've reduced and applied scrap and Scott money and thus claimed ownership of those as county roads. And then I think we need to clean up some of what goes, right? There still seems to be some confusion as to what was in the original agreement versus what we're applying for. That just needs, I think, from the transparency standpoint, the residents need to be able to see what they've signed up for by moving out there in this assessment, and us showing them that these are the services that you pay for through the assessment. As we continue to pave roads, the assessment can come down, but we shouldn't also be, we should be cognizant of the fact that the assessment hasn't been changed in so many years from a CPI standpoint either, and the cost of everything has gone up to maintain those roads as well. Whether that means an amendment or a relook at the assessment, I think there's valid points in the arguments about we've assumed ownership of some of the roads, and that percentage of roadways should probably come off the assessment. And likewise, the maintenance of the storm system is, I think the swale system, the canals that were part of the unimproved roadways are important parts of those unimproved roadways. I don't know that you can separate the maintenance of those from those roadways. And obviously, new paved roads have separate storm systems that are easier to maintain. So again, take those roadways off of that total mile assessment. Commissioner Sullivan.
A totally different subject. Just looking at the numbers here, these are the actual dollars actually spent, but it's not adjusted for inflation. Is that correct?
No, these numbers are actually pulled right out of the budget, so
Right.
this is what was
So
actually spent.
$500,000 in fiscal year 20 is 500,000 in fiscal year 24. Value-wise, less.
Value-wise, yeah, I would agree, it's less.
So it looks like there's a steady lowering of the amount of money here, basically, as you look at these numbers. So the numbers getting smaller is actually more significant because they are not adjusted for inflation.
Your buying power is basically less.
Right.
Yeah. And fiscal year 24, like I said, it's not the full year, it's just from October 1st to last month. So it's not an accounting of the entire year. We still have several months left to go.
Well, but still, it looks like, well, you know.
And some are higher, maybe those years, like in 23, we may have had some additional work going on out in Daytona North.
Yeah, I think you'd have to go do like, start at fiscal year 18 and then the next, like fiscal year 23. And look at those, compare those, and then if you adjusted for inflation, you'd have a lot less value. That's all. That's my only point.
Well, I mean, I'll say again, the other thing is setting a level of service, which I think they're on the right path of doing, which is we're coming out quarterly and doing these swales or these ditches, right? Or whatever the maintenance is. Because when you go years of not doing it, then you're going to obviously spend more time out there, cleaning up. And then I think it's almost like something legal needs to take back and look at what's charged in there. If you think about mahogany, I mean, the Attorney General opinion says special assessment cannot be imposed to pay for an improvement which is primarily of general public benefit. So our main artery, main roads, public benefit, not public benefit for everyone. Going to a park road, like a road that's on a park, that has a park on it, should that not be benefit the entire general public? Should that be in part of the assessment? There's so much going on this. I think you need to figure out what truly belongs inside that assessment, and then whether or not you should be charging a FEMA rate, which is a rate in an emergency according to the Stafford Act, whether or not that should be the rate that defines what the charges are for that area, so that in the future when they are assessed on the frontage and you guys have to figure out whether to adjust it or not, it doesn't have what could potentially be considered, the wrong fee or rate charged for the use of the car, the time trip out there, the labor, things like that. That's my take on it.
Do we know the population of the service district as opposed to the hammock?
I could pull it, I don't have the number in front of me.
And your thoughts, Commissioner, is that over time, if you pave the roads, then you have less maintenance and
Yeah,
labor
the
costs?
assessment was based on a number of miles based on what we acquired at the time. And as you pave them, based on Commissioner Pennington's argument, you're acknowledging if you're using scrap and Scott money and you pave those and improve the drainage, that those become county roads. Those, in my theory, should be removed from the percentage, and thus the assessment would be adjusted accordingly.
But this is just raw expenses. This has nothing to do with what the revenue side is. This is just expenses.
Well, I'm talking about, though, what the residents are paying.
They pay about
And I
$255.
I get that we're looking at two different things.
Yeah.
But so two different discussions are happening at the same
And
time.
what is our collection again for the total assessment?
It's about $255,000.
I mean, even if you added that, again, I'm just looking at the distribution of total tax dollars we're collecting and where we're spending it.
Those numbers are based on using FEMA rates from 2016, which I don't know that it should or should not be. So like, just if we sent a guy out there with a Ford F-150, we're charging $620 for the use of the equipment for one job. So I don't know that you know what the true, I'd say it like that, but I mean, what is the true cost of the use of the Ford of the F-150 if you're using an emergency management rate for a job to put a stop sign up?
I mean, if you told me that if we had a long-term plan and we paved as many roads as we could, and the dollar distribution for maintenance came more in line with the hammock, and if the populations were similar, then that would make sense to me that you would want to undertake a plan like that.
Right.
Again, the assessment being a separate discussion.
Right, is it truly costing the county $4 million or, whatever, for an area? Then maybe that's the priority, is to get that paved, because you're never going to be able to,
Well, priority is to
I know.
improve the maintenance of as many roads. I mean,
Right.
that's part of our job too, is to try and, but we're doing it all with gas tax money.
yeah.
All right, I went too far away from my mic.
So I don't know if the consensus here is just to ensure that we have the right roads, stormwater, into this, the proper charges are in this assessment to begin with. Would that be the consensus, is to have legal figure out if we're within authority for these roads and storm water
About what's allowed.
ditches? Or I don't know if John has a point to make.
Yes, I'd like to chime in and give you some thoughts to consider as you wrestle with this. Let's start with the ownership. Typically, when the county approves a plat, they would need the roads to be engineered to a certain standard, and then we're comfortable accepting it. And of course, that's not what happened here. We didn't accept it in just one clean fell swoop, but over time, we have exercised dominion over these roadways. We set the speed limit. We put up traffic signage. We maintain the roads. When we get grants, we pave them. We include them in our gas tax miles when we do the formula for our revenue. So if that's not ownership, I'm not sure what is. But it's not a traditional type of ownership. Keep in mind also, when a road is paved, it doesn't prevent us from assessing the properties because it still has to be maintained. As far as determining what is the benefit, now this is not going to be a satisfactory answer for you, but legal can't tell you what the benefit is. Ms. Petito can't tell you. Under the law, it's a finding you have to make when you adopt the assessment. And those are words in our resolutions every year. When you assess properties in the county, you are making a finding that they are indeed getting a special benefit. So for example, let's just take Marineland Acres. We have an assessment there to pay for the drainage project that went in. The drainage is within the right-of-ways. So again, the drainage and the right-of-way issues being integral. So we have found, okay, yes, they're getting a special benefit, and therefore they will be assessed to pay for that benefit. It's a legislative finding that you have to make. Now, we're here, we have to give you the information to make the finding. Yes, there's a special benefit, or no, there's not a special benefit, but it is a decision of the county commission as a whole, and not the staff or the county attorney's office. But we'll give you the information you need to make that finding. What were some of the other issues? Yes.
So they are the county's roads, right? I mean, that's where we're at. We've done everything that you said in there. So then so you're saying that it's up to the county commission to determine under statute what about this special assessment is a special benefit from the expenditure of the money collected by the assessment, the $270,000, that is in addition to the general benefit accruing to all properties or citizens. So it says a special assessment cannot be imposed to pay for an improvement which is primarily of general public benefit. So are not roads owned by the county, and what we do on their road versus what we do at County Road 75 or whatever roads we're out dragging, what is special about us dragging those roads that is not special enough for an assessment over at County Road or the hammock?
So in Daytona North,
Yeah.
just as an example, you could be of the mindset, okay, these are public roads and anybody can drive on them no matter where they're from in the county, and there's a general benefit. But if you live there and you own property that fronts the road, the argument would be that you have a better access. You have a road that drains and that it's not washboard and killing the shocks on your car.
That's no different for the hammock folk on a dirt road, right?
Well,
that don't
that's a
get a
fair
special
fair
assessment.
argument. Legally, I don't think you have to do the are we getting the equal protection of the
Right.
laws argument. I think you can just look at Daytona North
Right.
and say, is there a special benefit? Yes, or is there not?
Right, but I mean, now that's insane because you're saying ye in Daytona North, who gets your roads dragged just like the gentleman in the hammock, you get to pay a special assessment for it.
That's what's happening. It's in the eye of the beholder in terms
It
of
is.
if there's
And
equity
we're
there.
the whole, it's up to us now to say, is that, and honestly, is that really legal at this point to be assessing them for a drag that we're doing across the street for no additional assessment?
Well, I think it's legal. The question is it wise? And that's for you to just determine. You could also look at it as a transparency tool. We're showing, okay, we're assessing you these dollars, and these dollars are being spent on your property. Whereas the people in other parts of the county who are just buying gas or paying the general revenue, that revenue the county can spend on whatever they want, other parts of the county. But when they pay that assessment, we can't take it out of their neighborhood and spend it in a different part of the county.
I just don't see I don't think it's wise. That's going to be me, and it's not just because it's my district. I'd say that for your hammock. I'd say it for anybody that was being assessed this. I don't think it's wise. It's our roads. We do the same level of service. There's no above and beyond benefit to these folks that changes from other unpaved areas that we do. I think the problem, the onus always falls on us to figure out is how do we afford to drag all the roads, and what is the level of service we should be giving to all the roads that are dirt, period. Why are we, just because they call and we're going out there all the time, maybe we have to really say this is the level of service you get because you are our roads. And I just think that I don't think the special assessment is really, the proper thing to do any longer out there. That's my take on it. I think if you did one for a mosquito or something that we know we do there that we don't necessarily do for other people in these other areas, then that would be one thing. But charging them for roads and stormwater on a special assessment, there is nothing above and beyond that we don't do for other people on dirt roads, and we have taken ownership of those roads. So I don't see it any longer. And all for what, $250,000 when we know it's costing us more anyways, and we've got to find the way to pay for that to begin with.
So if we took it, just zeroed out and did away with the assessment, what's the impact on Daytona North? Nothing? Zero?
Well,
No impact?
you'd have to change the level of service. So, and just looking at the slide, the hammock has a large population, but on average, they get about 5% of staff time on average. When you look at Daytona North, their average is somewhere in the high 20s to 30% of staff time. Are the folks in Daytona North willing to accept maybe a lower level of service, do away with the assessment, but maybe they drop down to also 5% on average? You'd have to drastically reduce what you're doing out there. And then it would free up staff allocation to focus more on your major and minor roads if they're willing. I mean, I don't know
I
if
think
they're
you have to
willing.
give them the option. I think you have to I don't know how that goes about, whether it's a notice, because the major and the minor roads are just as important, and we're not spending time on them either. So I think they deserve an option to determine their level of service and if they want to stay into the special assessment. I don't know how you go about that. It's not my.
I mean, you could cut their time in half if you wanted to start implementing something with a notice, cut their time in half. So if they're, and I don't know the timing, but if they're there 4 days a week doing work, well, now they're only going to get 2 days a week of work. And then that extra time will be carried over to your major or minor roads.
What does that mean? Does that mean that they'd call for service and we'd say no?
It's not your day. I mean, honestly, I don't know. We have to make sure that the roads are safe for first responders, for school buses. But then you're looking at probably the major roads, whether it's Mahogany or, some of the existing paved roads that are out there are pretty much the ones that the school buses are utilizing. You still have some minor roads that aren't paved but produce more trips. So when we're looking at paving roads, the focus should be on those roads ahead of the local roads. It really just comes down to how do you want to allocate the resources?
I can only, a couple points. I don't know if by the conditions of the roads that we accepted, if by nature, right? So the roads were not up to standards at the time. Are they still not up to standards? Is the current design of their roads and systems inherently more labor intensive than other roadway systems? And as far as level of service, I mean, all I can do is I had calls from a gentleman that wanted us to water the roads before the rains came because it was so dusty. So they have a high level of expectation built into their maintenance.
Do they have it because they have a special assessment? I mean, I think they need to be given an option one more time here, because I know I sound crazy saying that. We're not collecting the money that it needs to maintain it to begin with, no matter what, unless you truly adjust and that could happen with any board. Some board could walk in here and say, well, you're costing me based on these FEMA rates and all that, 700,000 a year, we're going to adjust it up on you based on do they know that we answer every call, come out and drag it, and it's costing them, and that their assessment could go up at any time? Do they know that collectively? Do they know that they have an option that they could be out of it if they took a different level of service?
Well, I think over time you could also look at it that if the assessment remains the same over time, this will become an insignificant,
I don't
because
know.
we do
Joe Mullins was saying it was going to be paved out there, and that's 4 years ago. We're still not anything closer to it. I hate to think that, we're going to rush through and get things paved and they're going to all be free of this debt. I think it still comes down to, Sean, is it lies above the level.
I mean, I do think that I think there's still some information that we can do to make a case, if there is one of the level of service that we have out there, being more transparent as to what's happening out there. I don't disagree with the labor rate, if that's the appropriate labor rate that we're using. I just go back to the fact of the original assessment being part of that agreement. It's different than when we accept other plats or subdivisions, and I know this one's an old agreement, but if the roads are not, I guess I would ask engineering, if the roads at the time were not at at county standards, over time, are they still unacceptable roads, and we're spending more to maintain those roads than others? So that's a question that I have, which would inherently justify to some degree the assessment. I don't know the answer.
I don't know if there's a standard for a dirt road, but I know that you have challenges out there. Probably a few weeks ago, Hamid had taken Jorge and I out driving through there, and the roads don't all drain properly. There's ones where it drains to the side of the road and there's no swale, there is no drainage, so it just puddles up and will block the road. The whole road probably needs to be recreated and sloped. Instead of going to the right, probably needs to go to the left, because there is a drainage ditch or a swale cut in. But I mean, as far as a standard, there really isn't a standard on a dirt road. There's a lot of work to be done out there. More so, I would say, than other dirt roads that we have, just because of the way some of the roads that we went on out there, current condition, I mean, are they passable? Yeah. But they don't, one thing that they do lack is stormwater, which is, and I know we saw it when we got briefed on the stormwater master plan. It called for, I don't remember the dollar amount, but millions and millions of dollars on an improvement that's needed out in the Daytona North. Typically, those things are supported and funded by the people it benefits. It's similar to what we did in the Hammock when we did Marine Land Acres, and each one of those property owners pays an assessment over a period of, I think it was 10 or 15 years to pay it back.
Yeah, but you're at 40 years and they still don't have drainage on Tangerine. So at some point, like,
But they're paying, again,
when the hammock
$80.
calls, when the hammock calls and says, I need you to come drag my road, and it's not your day to drag the road, do we still go to the hammock and drag the road because someone called?
I don't know that we get many complaints up in the
Right.
No,
hammock.
I don't get the complaints because we do it on a regular basis.
And you can see, I mean, from an allocation, it's on average 5% of the staff, and it's
But
probably
if they
comparable.
called and we went, then what defines that that's not that's still regular general services? So Daytona North has a lot of people, a lot of roads, more roads probably than the Hammock, and dirt roads in terms of dirt roads. So they're calling and they're getting it, and they're paying extra, a special assessment for it. But if the Hammock wanted to and they all decided to call tomorrow and say, come out here and drag it, we come out and drag it, and they're still not being charged a special assessment. What defines that that's a special assessment versus whatever else we do when someone needs a road dragged because it's extra bumpy this day?
I just think it's the difference between, in the Hammock, on average, they get 5% of staff allocation.
Yeah.
Out in Daytona North, they're getting upwards of 30% of staff allocation. I think that's the delta that they're paying the extra for. It's not that they're maybe receiving new services, they're getting enhanced services because we're there all the time, and that's the difference. They're paying a portion of that extra service, but they do call and they ask for extra service. So we can certainly do a town hall and, get input, do a survey or something.
Do we have it by roadway mile? Is it broken down into the roadway mile based on how many miles are in the hammock of dirt roads versus in Daytona North?
Let me see if it was on the
Yeah.
previous slide. We had it broken out by major, minor. I don't know if we,
So within the service district, we have 54 miles.
let me back up a little. So you had this, which is maybe not to the exact level of detail that you're looking for, but you have your local roads in Daytona North. You have almost 55 miles that it's unpaved. In the Hammock and other local roads in the entire county, you've got 61. So, I mean, you have a pretty large portion that remain in other areas, which could include portions of the Hammock that remain unpaved. You've only got just under 9 miles paved in Daytona North.
I think we need to clearly define what the level of service they'll be provided for their special assessment is above and beyond any other area that calls.
I'd like to see a little further breakdown without spending, crazy amounts of time on the cost per mile of these. Where's the other local roads broken down into? Because we have one distinct area. So if we're able to group them between other dirt roads west of US 1 versus Hammock dirt roads, just to be able to, I think that might be one way to justify or to look at levels of service.
Okay.
Because it's becoming apparent levels of service is pretty hard to define.
Well, and the same thing, just like mosquito, if the Hammock called and wanted to be sprayed for mosquito, what pays for that versus now their special assessment pays for mosquito spray?
It's on their taxes. It's part of the East Flagler
Oh, they're
mosquito
on the east
control.
side,
So they're
but
paying
other
for it.
areas, do we never spray?
No, we're bringing in slowly areas off of US 1, Plantation Bay. I know Espanola was one, so slowly we're picking up other areas that weren't getting sprayed before that are now.
Hammock's getting sprayed.
Got it, yes, sir.
I think you need to, if you're gonna look at the miles of roads, you also need to factor in the population too. You need to have a better understanding of that too, because, I mean, you could have, that category there, that's 61 miles of other local roads could be a mile-long road with only 2 houses on it. You know,
But they still have to be maintained.
no, I understand, but that has to be, I think, part of the overall analysis.
We can pull that together. It might take a little bit of time to see how many connections or houses, units are on each road, but I know we have the breakdown of the different roads by category through the work order, so that won't be an issue to look at, but we can certainly try to add a layer of population. Maybe GIS can help us with that.
And I think you want to tell them, Daytona North, if you're going to remain them in a special assessment, that this is the maximum amount of maintenance you also get, because they could call 3 times, we could drag a road 3 times a day. We've never clearly defined what the level of service is for that special assessment on top of it all. And I think that's just what's missing here, because then you can, I mean, you have to define that, right? Or else that's just like telling everybody you could pay, 50 cents and I'll be out there 6 times a week to drag that front road. I don't know that it goes the other way. Maybe you're over dragging, their expectations aren't set because we've never told them this is what you get for your special assessment. And so you either get the standard level that we give all the folks in the counties with dirt roads, and you have no special assessment, or you have a minor one for your mosquito or whatever it is, or this is the highest level you get for your assessment of work done out there in a quarter or year or whatever. So I think it just needs a clearer definition. And then actually do something. I mean, we said, well, we're collecting it and they need stormwater and they need storm management. We've been collecting it for 40 years. It's not even covering the work being done out there, let alone are we ever going to get to the stormwater piece that needs to be done for them with their special assessment? No, it's just not enough money. So then that falls into, are you going to say that we cover their stormwater with this, and then on top of it, later on when we do a stormwater plan and we need to do another assessment to the entire county for the stormwater plan, should their stormwater still be paid for in this special assessment if we're going to have another assessment for stormwater for all of the county? I don't know.
All right, I think I got enough notes here to get us working, I think, in the right direction. So talking a little bit about what local program funding is available, the county's been very successful in the past receiving both federal and state transportation support for funding. Being recognized as a small county does have its advantages, and many times there is no local match. That will change as our population continues to grow. There are 2 state programs that are outlined by Florida statute. Once we exceed a population of 200,000, we would no longer qualify for those programs. That's going to be some time, probably 15 years or so. So looking at these, the local agency program, or the LAP, is a federal program. There is no local match. FDOT provides the oversight. The SCRAP and SCOP are the ones that we're probably more familiar with. SCRAP does not have a local match, but SCOP typically is a 75-25 match. We also cover things that once we do an initial bid for costs, if there is an overage, typically it exceeds FDOT's participation, and then the county is obligated to cover that. So just something to keep in mind. And so what are those additional needs? And so moving forward, as we continue to transform from a small county to a medium-sized county, we do need to develop a plan where we, while we still qualify for some of that small county funding. So there's really no way to determine when we'll reach that population. But we do have a list of things that we know we need to focus on. So looking at the paved roadways, this is just really kind of like a summary of what we saw in some previous slides. You look at 110 centerline miles, total cost of 110 million. We'd have to be setting aside about $7.5 million annually. That's just to maintain your existing paved roads. Your unpaved roads, you've got 122 centerline miles. Annually, you need about $4 million set aside to start putting towards your unpaved roads. And then through the River to Sea TPO, we have the Safe Streets and Roads for All. And moving forward, there was funding provided for the Safety Action Plan. And then moving forward, we'll look at some implementation of some of those improvements. There will be a 20% local match that's going to need to be set aside for that. So just again, looking at a summary of what some of those financial needs are. We know that we have the need for paved roads, unpaved, and then the cost overruns or the local match on some of those 5-year work plan program roads. So in looking at it, you've got annually about $12.5 million in need. FDOT covers about 5.5 of that, so you've got about $7 million shortfall. In the past couple years, we've allocated about $1 million towards that $7 million. So you definitely have a little bit of a shortfall gap there. So what funding options do we have for consideration? You could do a dedicated millage through your ad valorem. You'd have to generate about $0.5 to give you about $7 million annually. That would impact all of your property owners in Flagler County. Another option would be, we did talk about 1/2-cent small county discretionary sales tax. We talked about doing that possibly in conjunction with public safety and infrastructure or roads. In looking at the breakdown of that 1/2 cent, we would end up generating 10.5 million countywide. Of that, Flagler County would receive 4.7 million, Palm Coast would receive 5.2, Flagler Beach at 279, Bunnell at 200. Marineland would get a small piece, and Beverly Beach would get a small piece. It's really small, so I didn't put it on the slide, but they would receive funding as well.
I have a question about this, the 1/2-cent tax. If we were to look at implementing that for road and public safety, is there a way to negotiate with Palm Coast, Flagler Beach, and Bunnell to receive a portion of their 1/2 cent back for roads that we maintain where the properties were annexed into their jurisdiction? By calculating, I'll just give you an example, Roberts Road, it's still our road. The properties that aren't on it are not our properties, but we still have to maintain it. So if we were to take a 1/2 cent, so is there a way to pull all the roads that we still have to maintain that don't technically have anything annexed in into the county still, or into that, and make an agreement with them that they would give us back a portion to continue to maintain county roads, and then also a portion, and I guess this will come up in our workshop when we talk about the sheriff, that they also give us back a portion for EMS, fire, and sheriff 911 services, et cetera, based on their volumes of use. So I think like if we were ever to entertain this for roads, we should definitely have a discussion about how many roads we continue to maintain that are in their jurisdiction, and have some sort of agreement where a portion of theirs come back to us so that we can continue to maintain roads that are county that reside within Palm Coast, Flagler Beach, Bunnell, and the same thing with EMS, fire, and sheriff.
Also is the issue, every time this comes up, the 1/2 cent sales tax, we say we're going to use it for something else. We've talked about using it for the fire department. We've talked about using it for the sheriff, splitting him off. So I agree with you. We have to be pretty clear and have a pretty clever plan if we're going to try to do this and sell it to the public. It's going to have to be pretty clear.
Not only that, but I mean, I'm not being rude, but, the beneficiary of half of this is Palm Coast, yet they continue to have services like extreme services they use our EMS. Bunnell uses our fire. They added 6,000 houses the other day, and now we have to solve for the fire and EMS in that area. They're creating the growth, and it's not necessarily our board creating the growth, but it puts us in a position where we have to look at things like this so that we can keep up with their growth. They're annexing in properties like Roberts Road, but we still maintain the road. We, as a county board, are faced with having to adjust ad valorem or entertain a sales tax for their growth. I think that they should come up with a portion of that sales tax back into the county so that we can continue to offer the services we have to add for their growth.
I think it's entirely opposite. If a $800,000 house gets built in Palm Coast, the county tax collection goes up, and most of the services that they're receiving are from the city of Palm Coast, not from us.
Yeah, I'd have to see, but let's look at like Bunnell, right? You're adding 6,000 homes in that newest subdivision. They use our EMS, they use our fire. We have to now look at adding, a possible a fire department out that way or whatever. What is the cost of their growth in these areas, these pockets on the county that we won't necessarily make up an ad valorem? That's a really complicated figure you got to come up with, but I get X from you for ad valorem. It doesn't fully cover me putting a $10 million new fire department for your growth in, because you use those services. So it's complicated, but are we really getting everything out of the ad valorem off that growth to cover new infrastructure? Maybe maintaining existing, but I don't know if it covers new infrastructure that we have to create. That's and I don't know the numbers. That's why I'm asking that question.
No, not to tell Bunnell how to do things, but if they're going to have this huge development out there better be a fire department, a firehouse paid for by the developer. Should be out there. There should be a school out there paid for by the developer.
Well, there'll also be a lot more money coming in from the 6,000.
We shouldn't have to pay for that.
I think Commissioner O'Brien, that's a good point, right? In theory, ad valorem's supposed to cover the services and things, and that's on us to figure it out that it does. But when you're creating new territories and large number of people, and you're having to look at adding $10 million fire departments, and that wasn't necessarily, because they use our services. Are they covering their true costs and the one-time costs, of the impact they're making to the region on the county? So
I
that's
would
my
just say,
question.
given what we're facing in the way of additional costs, due to a lot of reasons, not just roads, the half-cent sales tax is only going to cover part of it. Nobody's saying it's going to try to fix the whole problem. But if you look at options, we don't have a lot of options. And so this is just part of the problem, is what I'm trying to say, as far as what it's going to cost to run the government in the next few years. So, I mean, I don't see us doing a lot with millage at this point. And
Those new residents that are coming in are paying a lot higher ad valorem tax than the same value property that's had homestead exemption and it's been in place for 20 years too. So
Yeah,
it's just a lot of different ways to look at it.
yeah.
but we don't collect their impact fees, right, on the 6,000 houses. So, but we provide fire and service. So is that area going to now need a fire and service
Well, we
building?
would collect
We do
impact
collect
fees
impact fees.
for some things.
No, I'm talking about, let's say the city of Bunnell drops
In
6,000.
Bunnell, we have an interlocal with each one of the cities. Bunnell will collect the impact fees, but you're going to need a fire station before you ever collect those impact fees.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what Commissioner Hanson said. That's where you, as the municipality, you need to be tough and smart in your dealings with the developer.
But if we don't point out beforehand that, I mean, there needs to be some sort of, this board has the unfortunate, I don't say it's unfortunate, of having to entertain doing a 1/2 cent sales tax, and really we didn't create the growth that it's going to be required for. The 911 calls, the, all these things that we're saying we now need funds for, wasn't necessarily created by this board, but now we're going to need a fire department out in Bunnell to surface all their growth, because, are we adjusting our agreements with them to make sure that that's covered by them when they create growth? Are we, if we have to do this 1/2 cent sales tax, or shouldn't they pay us a portion of that because we have to continue to offer these services on growth we didn't necessarily create? That's where I'm at with it. I understand the ad valorem part, but it's the initial shock of it all that, should they keep their 5.2 million if we're saying it's going to 911 or sheriff services or whatever? Do they get to keep their whole, that's my thought. I understand the ad valorem portion. I just don't, it's unfortunate this board has to entertain doing a 1/2 cent sales tax.
Which board?
Our board.
How many months till November? Right.
Yeah, right?
I will say that it's great that we are having this discussion, and we will be at the table when those projects start to move through the system, because there's different layers. I mean, I've had multiple conversations with admin. I mean, we talk about impact fees. That west side expansion for Bunnell, they will receive impact fees for roadways, but they're utilizing the state and county roadway system, and all those trips are going to generate back into our systems. So there needs to be alternative ways of being able to recoup some of the maintenance for those roadways, and the additional needs for, everybody's mentioned it, the fire service, the fire rescue, all those different things are, we will be at the table to make sure that that those things are covered, and it's good to have that publicly now, in advance of Bunnell working through their plans. They need to know all of the stress points that are out there, and there's a lot of planning that they have to do, and that type of, our normal type of single-family residential, which is throughout Palm Coast and being expanded, does not pay for itself. Those are not winning developments. It's going to require mixed-use developments. I mean, Bunnell has included some areas in their plan with commercial town center type developments, and those are the areas that will help carry those other costs. But there's so much that remains to be seen yet on that development plan. I'm more worried about the fact that they gave up the conservation lands that were part of our comp plan and are now gone and converted to ag, and it'll be up to the Water Management District to permit and preserve those, and they've taken that protection off of those lands, whereas the county, we had identified those, and those were protected. It's kind of concerning from an environmental standpoint. Right through Haw Creek, that whole area is right in the middle of that development, and there's a lot that has to be looked at from that standpoint as well. But I'm glad at least everybody's thinking, and we'll have to have, more discussions with the city. We've prided ourselves on good conversations and cooperative planning and discussions with our other municipalities, and that has to continue. We all have to be at the table on these things.
I think you said it a while ago, maybe just in us having conversation, Andy, but, try and make sure we try to learn the lessons that St. Johns County is dealing with the congestion and some of the lack of planning and coordination, up in the World Golf Village area and stuff. I mean, there's definitely challenges there, and hopefully we could learn from that and not have that happen.
Yep. There's been plenty of analysis done on good proper planning to be able to be sustainable versus not sustainable as far as revenue goes, to make sure that you keep up with your services. So those are the things we have to look at. So direction from us. Was there anything you needed specifically on healthcare other than those are your challenges as you put the budget together?
That's kind of where we're at with those. And then I took notes on the road discussions. We
Right.
can
I don't
come
think,
back.
you know, I am leaning, I have a lot of Commissioner Pennington's same concerns. I don't think the residents should be paying for the same services that everybody else is getting to. So within this, at least what I would like to see is to make sure that if there is an additional level of service based on lane miles, that is evident. If that charges to continue, if it doesn't, then we take another look at it. But I think the residents do need to know where that money is going more clearly.
I think it would be the exercise of going back and seeing what the initial language was when we assessed these special assessment. There must be a document that says, here's what you're going to get for that. And, but I think I would agree with Leanne, if we can't tell them what they're getting for that 58 cents per foot, then why are we collecting it? We have to be able to tell them what they're getting for that, so.
And as for the last part, I mean, we still haven't talked about beach management or stormwater and other issues yet. So I think we have to look in totality of all of the, we had the Parks and Rec plan put together. We had some goals out of that. There's a series and layers of different issues that we have to address that need our work.
I don't disagree. We have the beaches coming back to you next month, in the month of June. It'll be at I think it's your first meeting in June. We'll do a workshop, and then it'll be on the board agenda at that second meeting in June. They've put together a study based on funding and kind of a phased approach. We have been diving into the numbers, looking at the per capita cost, where do our dollars come from for our budget. I think people would be shocked to see that the unincorporated area contributes significantly to the tax base, followed by Flagler Beach, followed by Bunnell, and then Palm Coast. So when we look at distribution of funding for services, it is a little bit disproportionate, so I don't know how we balance that out, but we'll be bringing that to you for discussion at some point when we look at general fund ad valorem dollars. When we've talked internally about stormwater, there is not the ability to have a countywide stormwater assessment. It has to benefit the property. So typically, you'll see projects like the Marineland Acres where it only applies to a certain pocket or area. It'll be those residents in those communities or those areas that are going to be paying the assessment. Wouldn't it be fair to charge people in Palm Coast when Palm Coast charges already within their city limits? I believe the other cities also charge for stormwater. And if you look at just the unincorporated area, many of those areas in the unincorporated, like I'll use the Barrier Island Hammock area, you have gated communities where they already manage their stormwater. When it makes sense to charge them for a project that may benefit the west side, unincorporated. So it has to be specific to a certain area. It's not like one size fits all, so we're working through that. Right now, I don't think that we are prepared or there's not an ask from staff to move forward with an assessment yet for stormwater. We still have some funding left in the ARPA funds as well as potentially legislative funding to do some planning, design work on projects. And then once we go to implement those projects, that's where you'll see an assessment because it'll be contained within a certain area that project was designed for. But beaches is really the significant one. And we have that, as soon as we have a cleaned up draft, I'll share it with the board ahead of the workshop so you can kind of take a look at it. But more or less, it's looking at the county closest to the ocean having the biggest impact or the biggest benefit, therefore they would pay the most. And as you cross over the intercoastal and go from intercoastal to I-95, that would be the second zone. So it's kind of like zone 1. It's broken out into an A and a B. If your home or property is directly facing the ocean, then you're an A. If you're on the barrier island but you're not ocean front, then you're 1B. And then zone 2 would be the intercoastal to I-95. Zone 3 would be I-95 to US 1. And we were not looking at charging anything west of US 1. So we've got a couple different scenarios. And then there's like a gap, I guess we'll call it, of what we need to collect with what the individual property owners would be paying. And then that delta between how much money we need to set aside each year. There would be a linear foot assessment for the 4 HOA communities up in the hammock. So your Hammock Dunes, Ocean Hammock, Hammock Beach Resort, and Sea Colony would each pay a linear foot to further protect the dune for those residential communities. So it's kind of a hybrid approach. Businesses do pay into it if you're on the barrier island. Again, because you have a larger benefit there than, say, Holler and Green or, somebody maybe in Bunnell. So just looking at it different ways, and once we have a cleaned up draft, I'll share it with you. But that is scheduled to come to you at your first meeting in June, or at a workshop in June, and then your second meeting. So was there anything else?
I don't think so. Anybody, questions?
Your next 2 budget workshops, you've got one on June 3rd. That's when we're going to bring back the non-general fund. We've got our capital improvement plan. We've got rolling stock and IT replacement. And then on June 10th, we've got the constitutional budget scheduled to come. So, okay. Thank you.
Anybody want to adjourn?
Move, we adjourn. Second.
All right. Thank you very much.